My journey with succulents started about 10 years ago when I used to grow foliage plants for the florist industry. I remember making deliveries to my customers and seeing these amazing succulent arrangements alongside the bouquets. They also sold for a lot more than a bunch of any type of foliage I grew, so I thought I'll give them a go. And ever since then, I've been growing succulents and making all sorts of arrangements. I've also learned a lot along the way and do things differently now. When I started, the greatest demand and the majority of my orders from florists were for super crowded colourful succulent pots and terrariums. But I rarely do them anymore, especially the terrariums, for quite a few reasons. And when I do have someone insisting on getting one done, I make sure they're aware of what to expect. I call these garden in a pot and sell them at the markets. They are as crowded as can be, but their purpose is to eventually be planted into the garden. Crowded succulents will grow well for quite a while, and if they're maintained and kept in sufficient light, they can also last some years. How well they grow will also depend on your climate and the type of succulents. Much of what happens to super crowded succulents like these will be a result of how you care for them, but we'll talk about that a bit later on in the video. I use cuttings to make these pots and they are currently about 3 months old. The roots are now fully developed and each individual succulent is growing well. After another month or two in the growing season in smaller pots like these, the succulents will start getting root bound, competing for the little nutrients that will be left, and will start growing into each other's space. This can mean death for some of the smaller succulents as a result of the bigger, more aggressive growers outcompeting them. Let's have a look at a couple of examples. So this was one of the first pot arrangements I ever made to test how they'll grow. And the choice of plants is a bit questionable. This is Aptenia cordifolia, which is one of the fastest growing succulents with strong, thick roots. It will outcompete the other plants and still manage to look a bit sad as the pot is pretty small. Here's another view and more bad choices of succulents. The Aeonian suncup and sedum dragon's blood were the first to die. Their roots are much thinner and they don't tolerate crowding well. To my credit though, the rest of the plants, which are a mix of Crassula and Portulacaria afra, grew alright, albeit root-bound and stressed. But they lived in that small pot for a good year before I gave them a bigger home. That pot was made 10 years ago. This is a more recent example. The succulents in this pot were put together 10 months ago. It's not that tightly packed, but enough to demonstrate what crowded succulents will go through. So straight off the bat, there's some leaf loss on all of the plants. This is to be expected and is likely to happen to all crowded succulents in pots. These two echeveria are pushing against each other, which can cause mushy leaves and in some cases fungal disease. There is a little bit of that going on here, though this was made worse by the hot humid weather we've had 6 months ago. This poor little one is getting squashed from both sides and looks a little unhappy. It's suffering quite a bit of leaf loss and dark spots. The Graptoveria here is trying to grow outwards in hopes of finding new soil to root into. A huge chunk was broken in the winds a couple of weeks ago. These two are also trying to find fresh pastures. The Graptoveria fredives here is growing extremely slowly. It's one of the faster and larger growing succulents when it has plenty of root space. But the whole thing is not looking too bad and will be okay for another year or so. When crowded succulents become root bound, they'll also grow very compact, colourful and slow. The right plants will slow right down in growth, won't suffer a lot of leaf loss and will grow thicker, more stubby leaves. This arrangement is also about 10 months old. Just for reference, this is what each of these Echeveria cubicros would look like if they weren't crowded and in a tiny pot. Crowding in the garden is a bit different as there's a lot more root space, so succulents will likely grow at their normal pace, but can try outcompete each other for light and space. If you like the look of crowded arrangements or gardens, certain succulents will grow better and last longer. They will tolerate being root bound, won't lose as many leaves and shouldn't die. This pot has some of my favorite succulents that will tolerate almost anything and look amazing. They are also easy to buy as well as inexpensive. So we've got Sedaveria mayalen, Graptopetalum paraguayans, Graptosedum vera higgins, Graptosedum California sunset, and Sedum pachypillum. There's loads of others though. You can watch our super hardy succulents video for more or just Google to see which other varieties are tough. Crowded pots may need a bit of extra TLC. Because the plants in them are a bit stressed and crammed, it is best to not expose them to the extremes such as direct sun during heat waves or lots of rain. During heat waves, smaller pots may be best off under cover to avoid sunburn and complete burns of exposed stalks. When succulents get root bound in crowded pots, leaf loss is inevitable and stalks like this can easily get so sunburned the tissue in them will die. Smaller pots can also get very hot in strong direct sun, which can kill the plants in the pot. Succulents don't really like the super strong direct sun during heat waves, so popping them under cover outdoors in a bright spot for the duration of the heat wave should help. Crowded succulents are also more likely to get fungal disease such as black spot or rot. Tightly packed squashed leaves will create a bit more humidity around the base, which can lead to harmful fungus moving in. Keeping crowded succulent pots out of rain when it's been wet for a while should prevent this. Crowding in the garden should not be a huge issue. The biggest problem you're likely to encounter is large and fast-growing plants growing over and smothering the smaller ones. You can always do a bit of trimming and pruning to mitigate this. But I would not recommend lots of pruning in crowded pots, as you can go from this to this. I've taken way too many cuttings here, and because there's not a lot of growing space left in the pot, the plants here did not have enough energy to regrow and many branches died completely. This pot is also very old. I took my first photos of it about 6 years ago. Well, given that when crowded succulents start losing leaves and battling for space, light, water and nutrients, which eventually makes them stressed, I think I wouldn't be too far off if I said succulents are not that keen on being crowded. They will, however, mostly tolerate being crowded better than other plants and can even look great when crowded. So if you like the crowded look, go for it. But do a bit of research into which succulents varieties to use. You could also do something like this, which still looks pretty full, but there is a bit more space between the plants. This pot is now fully root bound and won't grow much more. And that is it for today. I hope this video was useful, and if you have anything to add or would like to ask a question, you can leave a comment below. To learn more about succulents, hit the subscribe button or go to succulentgrowingtips.com. Thank you very much for watching.